Jolene Park is an amazing woman. She is somebody who is known as a gray area drinker, somebody that wouldn't be on one end or the other of the scale, but somewhere in that middle area, somebody that was drinking and kind of knew that it wasn't working for her and wanted to figure out how she could create a life without alcohol. She's done that, and she's also a functional nutritionist and a health coach, and she has a new membership program that she's going to be talking about, as well as a podcast, and she also does one-on-one coaching. So you're not going to want to miss this conversation with Jolene Park.
Here, we want to show you what's possible in the world of sobriety. We introduce you to the various tools, programs, and resources available, because there are way more options than you may even realize. We want you to find the one that works for you.
And we do it through people who share their pathway to recovery and will help you find your path to freedom. Because getting sober can feel hard enough. You don't have to do it alone. I'm Sarah Roberts.
And I'm Roger DeVoe, and this is Sobriety Starts Here.
All right, Jolene Park, I am so excited to be sitting down with you today. Jolene is the founder of the Craving Brain membership site, and she's also a health and wellness coach and a sobriety coach, and she has the awesome podcast Edit. So we're going to talk about all of those things. Hi, Jolene.
Hi, Sarah. It's great to be here with you.
Oh, I'm so happy to have you with me. So let's get started. First and foremost, what is the Craving Brain membership site?
It is something that I'm working on right now and will be launching in May. And it's a site for people who want ongoing information about their craving brain. A lot of people, who've stopped drinking, or they're rethinking their drinking, or have been in that kind of loop of stopping, restarting, having a hard time getting out of that. But it's also, once we stop, then kind of that whack-a-mole comes up of obsessing about food or sugar, or trying to get on the a self-care routine, or dealing with debt and money or relationship stuff. So looking at all of that stuff about what are we really craving? What has really been deficient in our life and needs some more nourishment? And how can we do that first and foremost from a physiological standpoint, once we take alcohol out, but then also looking at some of the emotional pieces, the energetic pieces, and just really, really practical lifestyle pieces with relaxation, with relationships, with movement, having fun, leisure, all of that kind of thing.
I love it. So who is the Craving Brain membership site for? Who did you build that for?
I built it for the next step, for people who have stopped drinking, or again, they've kind of been in that back and forth. And then it's like, what's the next step? Because as you and I both know, just not putting alcohol in our body doesn't fix everything.
Yeah.
There's lots of next steps after that decision. And there's lots of nourishment that's needed. Some of it's physical, some of it's emotional, spiritual, relational. So this is kind of the membership as that next step piece. Whatever people are dealing with, primarily I work a lot with people who are rethinking their drinking, but it can also be once you put down sugar, or step out of a toxic relationship, or start to look at, things maybe with money and kind of healing that debt, excessive spending. Do we then pick up something else? When we set something down, there's a bit of a void. So then we want to pick up, the next thing. And so the Craving Brain membership addresses that very specifically in a really practical way of what are techniques, tools, tips to use that are relevant and useful as those next steps.
It sounds amazing. So what is the experience of the site? How does it work?
Well, I'm still building it, but so it'll be a monthly membership. And what I'm working on creating right now is a video that every member will get each month that addresses the physical. So something around, physical anxiety, like what are the supplements that can help physical anxiety, sleep, which a lot of people, when they're giving up alcohol, other things, sleep gets disrupted. So what are really practical, useful, relevant tips for sleep? So I'll address those kind of physical things each month. I'll pick a topic in a video. And then I'll also address more of the somatic the emotion side of things. What are some, I'm trained in somatic experiencing trauma-informed yoga. So some of those practical tips, and I've also done some healing touch, energy work, some Jinshin acupressure. And so that's what I'll be offering the community in that second video, of some acupressure points to hold that can help kind of change that addictive pattern, regardless of what your addictive pattern is. And then the third thing that people will receive is an actual guided somatic meditation each month, or a therapeutic writing prompt, because we know writing is really good for the brain, but not necessarily just sit down to a blank piece of paper and a pen and just go. There's some more kind of structured prompts and ways to go about that, so I'll be sharing those. And then I'll also have a live Q&A each month that members can come in as they're actually putting these resources into practice into their life that month. They can come back, ask questions. There'll also be a Facebook group to interact with the community. Everyone can share how it's going for them, the results they're getting, all pop in and answer questions. And then the final thing is there'll just be different bonuses and resources unique to the members. So I'll bring in some of my healthy discoveries that have helped me overcome my own craving brain over the years, and be interviewing them around the nutrition piece, the somatic piece, the money piece, relationship. And so those unique interviews will just be up in the membership community just for members.
Man, it sounds like you've hit on everything that so many of us are looking for once we get sober. It happens so much. We were talking about it before. You sort of play whack-a-mole with all of those different things that all of a sudden pop up. For me, it was sugar. For many other people, I know it is too. And for others, they start smoking, or they pornography gets big, or sex addiction, or whatever sort of comes to the fray because they've given up that first thing. So well done. It sounds amazing. So it's an online membership course that that people will have access to every single month and have access to you. So I love the sounds of it. Congratulations. I know it's launching in a couple of months officially, so that's exciting. But in the meantime, people can head over to your website and sort of get started by entering their name and email. And what would they get right away if they did that? Is there anything regarding Craving Brain yet right now?
Yeah, so I'm actually going to launch kind of that waiting list in April. So a couple more weeks, that'll be up, and people can head there in April. In the meantime, you can sign up for my free ebook, which goes on to my newsletter list. So I'll keep everyone updated that way. But when you sign up for in April, if you're interested in the online course, I will immediately have a video of kind of my signature piece about the 10 nutrients that are really nourishing to your mind and body. Which is my wellness wheel, which is what I've taught for many, many years. And it goes along with my philosophy that, we have this narrow definition in this country: eat right and exercise. And then we're healthy. Well, I think it's narrow because there are people who eat well and they exercise regularly, but they're not necessarily healthy. Yeah. So it's looking at the bigger picture of relationships and sleep and relaxation and service. Are you doing some volunteer work? Your spiritual well-being, emotional well-being, play and leisure. And so taking people through that they'll get that before the membership begins in May, because that's a foundation piece that we're working with, of that bigger picture of what do we need to be nourishing? What's become malnourished in our life? What's deficient and depleted? And then what the membership offers is practical tips, tools, and techniques to bring some nourishment. So I like theory as much as the next person, but I also want practical, just tell me how. And so that's my intention and objective with this whole membership, is really, really practical steps all along the way.
Like I say, I think that sounds fantastic. And how cool that people can really just get a sense of who you are and how you teach and your content and what you're interested in, what you're passionate about right away, even for free on your website. So I love that you offer that to start with. You also so you also do coaching. Let's go there next. So with your coaching, you do one-on-one coaching. How does that work, and who is that for?
So it's also Craving Brain coaching, and I work with people on a 30-day period or a 60-day period as the resource coach and accountability coach. So the people who are coming to me are generally high-achieving professionals, mostly women. I do have some men, but mostly women, A lot of my clients are in the healthcare industry. So a lot of therapists, coaches, nurses, social workers. I have attorneys, women who own their own companies, who are CEOs of nonprofits. So very high achieving, and have heard my story in different interviews and in my TED Talk. And they'll reach out saying, I identify with that type of drinking. That's how I'm drinking. There's nothing kind of external that is, qualifying as a rock bottom by any means, but internally, I'm really struggling. And I don't want to drink at the level I'm drinking, but I am. A lot of people don't notice and, don't really realize that I'm drinking that much. But it's this back and forth. I want to be able to have a glass of wine at a social event, and then it turns into many more than just that one. I regret it. I don't feel well. I don't sleep well. I wake up the next day thinking, what am I doing? So, or I've done it again type thing. So that's a lot of who I work with. They're in that place of really rethinking if this is the way they want to continue at this point. And so they come into coaching able and willing to stop drinking during that time. Often people come to me, they've already stopped for 30 days or longer, or they're at that place of like, no, I really, am ready to experiment with this and go through the coaching and, not be drinking as we work on replenishing their neurotransmitters, building up kind of some biochemical pieces, bringing things back in balance with blood sugar, with hormones. I do a lot of work on that. And then all of those practical resources with regulating the anxiety in the body, that somatic work, and customizing it. So depending on their story, their history, their pattern, customizing, and then they have me every day. So email check-in for follow-through, accountability on following through on the action steps, and we talk weekly on a phone call or video Skype to check in and make whatever tweaks are necessary.
I really like the sounds of that for somebody who has a really hard time staying accountable. And, sometimes we make a decision, and yet the next day we're like, wait a minute, I said I was going to do that thing, and then I didn't do that thing. So it's great that they can have access to you daily. And I like it that you're saying it's, either 30 or 60 days. To me, that sounded like you see a lot of success in people in just a month or 2 months time. So it doesn't have to be for the rest of your life that you have to do this kind of work. It can really be, in 30 or 60 days, you can completely transform your life if you are working with somebody closely that's really customizing the plan to you. So I really like the sounds of what you're doing, Jolene. I love it.
Thank you. And I, I'm very much, I see myself as that jump start, that launching pad. And often, many of my clients are, it takes a village. So many of them are also working with, their therapists. They may be going to meetings, doing another online program, but then they want that just one-on-one, really customized resources for them. Like I will look at their lab results, we'll talk about their thyroid levels. So we can really kind of customize. And some of that, I would have loved to have had that of like, what are the things to read? What are the things to listen to? What are some things that I can literally try this week? So that's what I'm providing is resources, and then staying with the clients on follow through. But for, an ongoing therapeutic relationship, I'm not a therapist. And so I'm very much coaching, resources, accountability. I work often in a team environment, but for people who need long-term therapy, I'm not a licensed therapist.
No, I think it sounds really cool what you do. That you're really that launching point. You're that starting point. And I love that you can analyze blood work and know what you're reading. So people would go to their doctor, they would get the requisition to go and get their blood work done, and then they would email that to you. They would scan it and email it.
Sure. Yep. They can do that, or just have it in front of them when we're on the phone, and we'll go through and, talk about where their levels are. And so, I look at vitamin D, I look at thyroid, vitamin B12, glucose levels, which is sugar levels. If there are hormone results, sometimes that's harder to get doctors to actually test. But hormones are very connected to neurotransmitters. Progesterone is connected to GABA. The serotonin is connected to our estrogen, and then dopamine is connected to cortisol, which is adrenal function and adrenal fatigue. So it all goes from a functional medicine, which is what I'm trained in, functional nutrition. All of that biochemical kind of physiology connects in, and I'm happy to, again, those are part of the resources that I offer clients. Some are interested and like doing supplements. Some don't. Either way is fine. We can talk about food options, but there's many practical things to do to help to bring the biochemistry in the body back into balance, especially after we've been drinking a lot.
I really like your approach, because I do find for so many, it's, read this book or behave this way or do this thing. And it's like, you're just making it really practical, that you're taking somebody, you're able to really analyze what their needs are. And then you can provide these recommendations, and they can either do it through food or through supplements, or they can do this action step, or they can use this tool. You're really pulling it all together for them as a really good coach. I really like the sounds of your work. I'm impressed. Now I want to skip over, because I want to get to your story, because your story is that, you sort of touched on it, that people reach out to you and say, yeah, I drank the same way you did. So I want to get into how that was. And of course, we're going to go there. But before we do, you're also the co-host of the Edit podcast. Can you share a little bit about who the podcast is for, what you talk about, what the experience is, and a little bit more about Edit?
Sure. So I co-host Edit, and it's Editing Our Drinking and Our Lives is kind of the full name. If you put in Edit podcast, we generally don't come up. It goes, iTunes thinks we're talking about writing or journalism. So if you put in Editing Our Drinking and Our Lives, it pops up. And my co-host is Aiden Donnelly Rowley, and she's in New York City. I'm here in Denver, Colorado. And we put out bundles. So we record 4 30-minute podcasts at a time and put them out every 2 or 3 months. We'll have another one coming up. We'll release a bundle in April. And we talk really about gray area drinking is really where we focus in on. It's my story, it's Aiden's story. Aiden is a mom of 3 girls in New York City. She's a published fiction author. And we both came to the point in our lives of saying the way we're drinking isn't working anymore. And it became a real hard stop for both of us. We didn't know each other at that time when we both made the decision, but then we found each other and created this podcast together. But it's that gray area of Aiden and I both have a similar story where we stopped drinking at various times in our life. Aiden stopped one time for a year, and she blogged about it for the whole 12 months of kind of her, no drinking experiment. I stopped, one time for 7 months. I stopped for 30 days and did like a paleo challenge. So we both have that it's a similarity in our story, and it's a similarity in many of my clients' stories, where, there'll be these times where it's like, I'm drinking too much. I'm going to stop, have the physical ability to stop. It's not at that level of physical addiction. But then mentally, do I really need to completely stop? What's really going on? How far down the spectrum is this? And so that's what Aiden and I talk about, because that kind of gray area hasn't really had a voice up to this point, yet so many people identify with it. And what we've had is kind of that either people drink normal or they're an alcoholic. And our podcast is, there's a whole demographic and millions of people between those two extremes, which is most people.
Yeah, and it's so true, because you so often hear that, where people struggle with not wanting to put alcohol down because they think, I'm not an alcoholic. Like, I'm not the guy on the side of the street with the paper bag. Like, that's not my story. I haven't been in trouble with the law. I haven't had any, health issues because of alcohol. I haven't even really had any emotional issues with it, with relationships. Like, nothing's really happened with it. But deep down, that whisper inside that that we hear, for so many people on the spectrum, and that's why I do kind of like that it's now alcohol use disorder, and it is a spectrum. It's not so you're either a normie or you drink alcohol normally, or you're an alcoholic. You're so right. There is this vast oasis in the middle of those two extremes, and I love that you're addressing that with your work. So let's get started with your story so that people, okay, so yeah, we told people where they can find the podcast. We're good on that, I think. If you want to say anything else about the podcast, you go right ahead. But I would love for you to share your story so that people can connect with you and understand how you came to be doing the work you're doing now.
Yeah. So my story is a gray area drinking story. And one thing that's, I think, a little atypical about my story than many people, but I think it's important to note, because it just goes along with what I'm really passionate about, of breaking this whole stigma and stereotype of what it looks like of either you can handle alcohol or you can't handle alcohol. And so, my initial kind of entry point into this was I didn't drink much early on. And I know that's a little atypical. So in high school and college, alcohol kind of wasn't a thing for me. What was a thing was anxiety. Anxiety is the root of my story. And because of that anxiety, I was actually a little scared of, I didn't want to drink too much to throw up, because I hated throwing up. That was the crux of, am I going to throw up? I don't want to throw up, anxiety thing. And then also didn't want to lose control. And so associated alcohol with that, and was in settings where it was, lots of beer, like in high school and college fraternity sorority parties and wine coolers. And I never, even to today, even though I don't drink today, but when I started drinking, I don't like those two drinks, beer or wine coolers. Mm-hmm. But late in my 20s, things kind of shifted for me with a relationship that ended. And I was really devastated by it. And there was wine in my house, and I opened the bottle. I'd never kind of had an association or connection with it. I kind of didn't get it. But in that moment,
you didn't get why people drank to relieve stress or anything.
Exactly.
Is that, yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. And, but my late 20s, after that breakup, drank that bottle of wine pretty much in one sitting, opened it up and said, I'm just going to drink this. And I was like, holy shit. Like, what have I been doing? This is amazing. Like, this is an amazing elixir. Like, it just shut off that ruminating, anxious brain that I've lived with for 28 years. It stopped kind of I don't kind of feel the emotional pain, and it worked, and I loved it. And so that was my entry point. And I really see that as a crucial fork in the road. And working with women now, especially, I hear those similar stories where there was some sort of transition or loss. And so transition with, a lot like a relationship ends, there was a death with a really significant person in their life. A child was born, empty nest, for women, children leave. There's something, being in the working world, then coming home to be with the kids, or, there's like that transition and kind of a loss of the life we knew to that point. And for me, there's a turn then of where alcohol starts to come in and starts to take a different dynamic. And that's exactly what happened for me.
Do you feel like because you were a kid that suffered with anxiety and you were always afraid of throwing up as a kid, and then you didn't like alcohol because you didn't want to throw up and you had heard that that's what happens, do you think that then for people that like if they have this traumatic experience or something that happens, empty nest or whatever happens, is there still something that's anchoring them back from their past typically? Or can people just develop this later on in life where something traumatic emotionally happens and they reach for alcohol? Can that be the story? Or is it typically tied to something else from childhood?
So that's,
in your experience?
That's an interesting question. My opinion on this, because of my experience and working with many, many others and hearing many stories, my opinion on this is that when we are in an activated negative emotional state, a really intense kind of activated state.
Like in this breakup situation.
Right,
yeah.
Right. So when people are in, a really heightened grief situation, a loss, heightened anxiety, fear, something where it's that negative emotion that's really escalated, and then we drink, it becomes a really slippery slope with that. So I think there are people out there who drink alcohol and they've honestly not drank in that heightened negative emotional state. They've done other things. Maybe they smoke cigarettes, maybe they eat sugar, maybe it's pornography, but I believe that once we're in kind of that state and then we put in the substance or the behavior, the biochemistry lights up like a Christmas tree and goes ding, 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 ding. And something shifts and it's hard to unshift that back. Does that answer your question?
Kind of, because it was almost making me think of the research that's done around fibromyalgia, where people can be genetically predisposed to fibromyalgia, and yet it takes a car accident, typically a physical trauma, sometimes emotional, but typically a physical trauma, and then all of a sudden now they are experiencing the pain and the lethargy and the health issues that come along with fibromyalgia. And it was making me feel like, is it like that? You had the anxiety as a kid, and then you kind of worked through it. And then all of a sudden you had this really negative emotional experience, and you used alcohol. And then it was almost like it just a switch flipped.
Right.
That's how it kind of was sounding to me. So that's why I thought I'd ask that question.
Yeah. And I think that if I would have, because then wine is my drug of choice. I mean, red wine is it. But I didn't really drink red wine until my 30s. So if I would have drank red wine when I was 15, I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
Like because I was in that heightened anxiety state. So your thing of like later in life or as a kid, I think it's about the environment. So when you're in that environment of heightened emotional whatever, it doesn't matter what your age is. What matters is the environment that you're in. And then when you add alcohol on that, it's like gasoline on the fire.
Yeah.
And I think that it's hard to go back. Once that trips, it's hard to go back. I think it can I'll explain this to clients. I almost see it as like chickenpox or the shingles. Like it's dormant in your spinal cord once you have it. It's there, it's dormant. It's always going to be there. You can activate it again, but it's always there. And so it's kind of that thing of like, it's there, it's dormant. And the way it's activated is in that intense emotional time. Now, here's the thing. Most of people living in this modern day life don't go, it's hard not to go into an activated emotional state. Mm-hmm. Life is anxiety provoking. Mm-hmm. Hard stuff happens. And so it's not about, you got lucky or you didn't. Everybody's affected, but it's what vice or what behavior are you putting in your physiology when you're affected?
So I guess what I'm wondering then maybe is, so when you were a kid suffering with anxiety, what did you use as a kid to calm yourself down because you weren't drinking alcohol? So what did you use back then?
Food.
Mm-hmm.
Food
mm-hmm.
and sugar. Yeah. So again, so that's the thing, right? Like what I was just saying of, we're all using something on some level.
Yep.
And that, going back to kind of this gray area drinking and editing our lives and our drinking, that's a lot what Ed and I talk about. And I'm really passionate about kind of shaking that, those people over there mm-hmm. have a problem, or those people are okay. And I think that it doesn't serve anybody. Mm-hmm. Life can be really anxiety provoking. It can be really uncomfortable. And that's ultimately, when it really comes down to it, it's not about the event or the conversation I feel uncomfortable and it doesn't feel good to feel uncomfortable. So I want to do something, I meaning the collective kind of we want to then do something to change that uncomfortable state.
Yes.
And no one's really immune to that.
Yeah.
We don't really get to be human and not feel uncomfortable.
Absolutely. Well, Russell Brand talks about it in his book that, called Recovery, where we're all doing something. So if you want to point a finger and judge somebody because they're using drugs, alcohol, whatever, someone else is using social media, sex, shopping. I mean, we're all using something.
Excessive exercise, excessive work. Yep. It's all of it is a way to, I don't feel comfortable and I'm doing something or putting something in my body to change that feeling. Is what it comes down to. And so no shame, no blame, right? It's not like, everybody's, now we're just screwed. That, that's not my message. My where I'm really passionate about this work is we haven't had models and we haven't had training on how to regulate our nervous system on a physiological standpoint, biochemically, really practical emotionally. We hear a lot of theory, but how do you practically put that into practice each day? And so that's where my work comes and what my love is and my passion, and not because I figured it out and don't do it perfectly, not at all. Mm-hmm. It's because I drug bloody knuckles and still continue to edit my life and look at how I can, what now is depleted, and where am I putting too much excess and then depleting something else, and always kind of that idea of it's not perfection, but just nourishment. So, you know,
So that you're not playing whack-a-mole anymore, so that you have your eyes wide open, you're totally aware of what's going on in your life. And I think that's so key about what your work does, is that it really helps people open their eyes and realize, I don't have to keep doing this thing that isn't working for me. I don't have to keep taking this drug or drinking this alcohol if it's not serving me. There are other tools and other ways to manage my stress and my anxiety and to handle my life and to conduct myself. And I love that now we have so many more of these role models like you who are sharing with us that life doesn't have to include alcohol if it's not serving you. And here are some ways that you can lead a life that you love, because you know, without having to always fill that hole. Let's fill it with healthier, better things that are going to be more nourishing. So I'm a big fan of your work. I really love what you do. So let's keep going with your story, because you're now, so you have that really devastating breakup. You drink that whole bottle of wine. You say, well, what the hell was I thinking? Why wasn't I doing this before? And then what happens to get it to where, you know, you realize that you need to make a change? Like, what happens in there?
Yeah, so then 15 years went by.
So tell us about what's happening in the 15 years. Are you drinking daily? How's it work?
I definitely wasn't drinking daily, not at all. It was more binge drinking. So, you know, going through the work week, the business week, I was going back to school. I actually did all my pre-nursing classes, and I was in line to go back to nursing school, and then started doing corporate wellness work. So didn't go to nursing school, but was, you know, taking classes, working, building my own business, created my business, Healthy Discoveries, in 2001. So I was early 30s at this point. And so during that time, kind of, you know, what was happening was it'd be just this hard work week, this push, just go, 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 achieving, producing, anxiety of, did I get it right? Did I do it right? What do people think? You know, all of that. And at the end of the week, it's just like the pressure is on the lid, is just, I got to blow it off and drink a bottle of wine because I know it works. And kind of looking forward to that. So that was easy to do. And honestly, there wasn't kind of this conscious thought of like, I looked back on it years later of that breakup and then kind of how I started using it. It was just kind of what I started doing. Mm-hmm. I didn't think much about it. I didn't kind of see the connection of like the stress and the anxiety. I just drank a bottle of wine.
And would you be alone? Like at the end of the week, would you plan for that bottle of wine and would you drink it by yourself?
Often, yes. Mm-hmm. Often that was part of my story. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and then that became very much part of my pattern of, you know, because I was living on my own, traveling a lot for business. So I was alone a lot of the time. And, you know, in the evenings, either I was out for dinner or home, and it was like, well, I'll have a glass of wine. And then how eat is like, well, I had a glass, screw it, I want another. Like once that first glass is in me, I want another. And it's like, oh, I'll have another. And then the whole bottle's gone. So that was a very easy pattern that was developing. And then it really changed. There was another kind of change on the, you know, as it went up a notch in my late 30s. And it just was becoming more frequent. I was part of a social group at that time where, you know, it was happy hour on Tuesday night and happy hour on Thursday night and happy hour on Friday night. So it just, I fit in with that and didn't stand out at all of looking like somebody who drank too much. You know, I could be out and most of the people I was with were drinking more than I was. But it escalated my drinking.
Now, were you consciously trying to not drink too much in front of people, or were you just not wanting to drink that much when you were out in public, or was it in the back of your mind, I know I've got a bottle of wine at home when I leave here? How was that? I'm curious about the way your mind was working. Because I know for me in my drinking, it was constantly looking at other people's glasses, seeing who had more, making sure there was enough, darting my eyes around the room to see like where the wine was, and always knowing that I had alcohol at home, making sure, knowing that I had to have alcohol at home.
Yeah, yeah. You know, that's interesting. It wasn't like I don't want to drink that much in front of other people. It was more, I want the effect of wine. I love the effect of wine, and the effect that wine gave me was it shut my brain off. And then I can just sit here and just like not talk And that's what I wanted. I don't have social anxiety. I wasn't kind of like, I need alcohol to talk to you and to be out. But I want to use alcohol to just downshift and to not talk and to be, so it was more of that. It was like, have a couple drinks. Now I just don't want to talk. Like now I just really want the numbing effect, and I want to go by myself and have a couple more glasses for that numbing effect, which I think is also a different piece. And I think most people, it's that social, you know, with people, I just want to keep drinking to be social. And I'd be like, I want more to just really like wind down and stop.
Yeah, that idea of either, you know, sort of to turn the volume up or using alcohol to turn the volume down. I was a definite turn the volume up kind of person, and you were the opposite. That's really interesting.
Yeah.
So keep going with your story. So now you're drinking, you know, a bottle of wine a week, and you're drinking out with friends, and you're in your 30s. Keep going.
Yeah. So now it's like 38 and late 30s. And the kind of, you know, wanting a relationship that didn't happen even 10 years ago, and had been dating, and my drinking would escalate when I was dating too. That was also kind of a component. And I think there was a bit of like that bracing of when's the shoe going to drop again. Picked a lot of men frequently that were also big drinkers. So that was what the relationship was built on. And but then it never went anywhere because it was built on alcohol. And so, you know, and then another relationship wouldn't work, and another relationship wouldn't work, and getting pissed and rage about, this isn't what I wanted to happen.
And would you be ending the relationships because you were like, these are just based on alcohol, this isn't really clearly like, was it because the men were unavailable and you just figured that out at a certain point?
Sure, yeah, they were, but then I was too, right? For me to pick an unavailable man, I am too. Like it goes hand in hand. And you've got two unavailable people, me wanting to, you know, ultimately build a family, and thought I wanted to be a mom. And there's just building this foundation on sand kind of thing. So getting pissed at it, them, but also me, like, you know, what, but couldn't really admit all that and language it. And so I would just keep drinking, and the drinking started to really increase at that point. And then turning 40, hormones were shifting. So it was affecting me differently. You know, I would drink kind of what I was used to, and it's like heart pounding at 11 o'clock at night, trying to go to sleep. Couldn't sleep because my cortisol now was starting to get more wonky with hormone stuff, and sleep was really disrupted. And so, and then I just don't think I was tolerating alcohol as well. And as hormones dip, this is what I work with clients on and teach. You know, I knew my GABA was already low because of my anxiety, but when GABA's low, progesterone starts to go low. And when progesterone's low, two big symptoms are insomnia and anxiety. So it's a vicious cycle of initially having a drink, feeling like that relieves the anxiety, feeling like it kind of brings me down to be able to fall asleep, but it doesn't, because then I'd wake up in the middle of the night. So it was just this vicious cycle as it was escalating. And it was becoming much, much more easy, and just kind of my pattern and habit of to drink most days. You know, to have a drink, sometimes, you know, one or two, but often it just continued, and it was becoming kind of that habit, and was going back and forth. You know, I did 7 months, I think it was 2012, had another breakup and said, I'm done drinking, and just kind of gripped down, and I quit again for 7 months. And I just kind of slid under the radar because you know, I'm a functional nutritionist. I teach wellness. Again, outwardly, my drinking was never, I was never like the party girl. You know, nothing about me outwardly looked like the big drinker. And so I just slid under the radar. I'm like, oh, I'm just kind of, you know, I'm really doing paleo, really strict right now. And people would be like, okay.
But did you quit because you knew you had an issue with alcohol? Like, were you trying to test to see how strong of a hold it had on you? Or what was your reasoning for doing the 7 months, or even the paleo thing? I would quit during those times because I was so sick and tired of feeling so sick and tired. And you knew that alcohol was the reason? Oh yeah, because that was part of the pattern of, I loved the initial effect in the evening, but every next day, every day, I was so queasy and so nauseous, and because my blood sugar was so off, and I just can't. I probably would have drank a lot more,
but I don't have the biochemistry to drink. And what I know about biochemistry, I know that there's liver enzymes. So there's like a phase 1, phase 2 detoxification that everybody has in their liver. And like, I can't tolerate caffeine. So when I drink caffeine, it's a liver enzyme that doesn't break it down. Like, I feel kind of clammy and like kind of like I have the stomach flu, like a little nauseous. And if I get too much, like if I drink, regular coffee. I also do that with like garlic and onions, the sulfur in them, and they're amazing, right? I mean, garlic is an amazing food, but I don't have the enzymes to break it down. So I'm like all gassy and gross and bloated. But same thing with red wine, because it's sulfites. So I just don't, it makes me sick, like queasy, and I'm just like, ugh. And I would feel that all the time, but then I would keep drinking. And so I would get sick of, I'm like, I can't keep feeling like this. Like, I'm so tired of feeling woozy and queasy. So that would be kind of my motivation to quit. But then I'd be like, why am I quitting? Like, so many people drink so much more than I do. I can be a social drinker, like just go to out to an event and have a glass of wine. Like, why can't I do that? So then I would go back and do that. And then pretty quickly, a couple days, a week or so later, I'm back to drinking a bottle of wine by myself really frequently. So that's really how it was escalating. And because of so much back and forth, because of so much of that living in the gray, and not hearing any conversation about it, right? Like, I would read the alcoholic memoirs looking for, I wanted to hear a woman voice this, of like, just this, like, I'm drinking, but it's not necessarily excessive, but I keep drinking. It's, and I just kind of couldn't find that story. And, but because of the back and forth and, so many years of like having the experience of when I would go back to drinking, I would go right back to it, and it was escalating. And I felt like I was on a bit of a ticking time bomb with some things. I just felt like my 9 lives with it were running out a bit. And I just was like, I can't, I'm 43 years old. The thought of like, for the next 10 years up to like being 53 of drinking like this, then trying to stop, and then drinking like this. And I'm just like, I'm done. And I know what I'm signing up for here when I say I'm done. Like, I've been through holidays without drinking. I've been through, it's like, I know. And I went through that whole conversation in my TED Talk. I referenced, I started that talk with, I was, driving down the highway, having one of the most important conversations I'd ever had with myself. And that conversation was, what if and when I get married, am I seriously not going to drink at my wedding? Like, what if, there's the romantic holiday in Italy? What if there's that devastating phone call of like, a parent dying at 3 a.m? Like, that was the scenario of what if, and it was like, it's not an option. It's no longer an option. That was my response.
You mean you were fast forwarding, having made the decision that you were going to quit drinking in that moment, fast forwarding to all of these events that are potentially going to be coming up in your life and imagining them without picking up alcohol. And that's what you were processing at the time?
Yep. And the question to myself, what am I really not going to drink? And the answer to myself was yes. No matter what happens, good or bad in the future, alcohol is not an option for me.
How do you think you came to that decision in that moment?
I think it was those years of going back and forth and having so much actual experience of not drinking and then coming back and drinking, and what would happen, and how I quickly went right back to it. And it's like, this just, I don't need to prove this anymore. Like, it just does not work for me. It's, the thought of thinking that I'm just going to have a glass of wine at a networking event every now and again, that's not my reality. The reality was, it was just much more frequent and making me sick, literally. And then very much of like, the relationship that I've always wanted, drinking like this is not going to get me that level of connection and intimacy that I've always wanted. And it was like those pieces just kind of clicked and came together. And then the ticking time bomb piece, I mean, I told my nurse practitioner about it about 1.5 years before I quit. I said, my anxiety is really up and I'm drinking too much. And she said, you know about the breast cancer connection with alcohol, don't you? And I didn't. that's not what got me to stop. I drank another year and a half, but you know, things like that, of just how much I was drinking on a regular basis and the connections that are there. I'm teaching wellness, and we know the connection with 7 cancers. You know, the driving piece, it was pre-Uber. And, you know, there were just things where I felt like I'm playing Russian roulette.
So you were drinking and driving is what you're saying when you were actively drinking?
Yep. So those were 2 pieces. And then the relationship that I wanted, knowing how I felt, knowing that it isn't just, you know, I'm just going to be a 1 glass every now and again drinker. And the negative was far outweighing the numbing effect. And so I had to figure out other ways when there was that anxiety, discomfort, how to deal with that. You know, and giving up the numbing of the alcohol. And so I made that decision 3 years and 3 months ago, and I haven't had a drink since.
So amazing. So tell us, what are some of the tools that you use in your own life? And I know you share these with your clients as well, but what are some of the things that you do sort of day to day to not drink alcohol and to feel, and to, if anxiety comes up, how do you handle it?
Well, it changes. So, you know, like what I was doing when I first quit versus what I do now is completely different. So I've found that not putting alcohol in my body and brain for over 3 years, my anxiety has reduced 90%. So, you know, I just always thought I'm an anxious person. And, you know, I say that. I'm like, I've always kind of been an anxious person. But honestly, not drinking for 3 years, I just don't feel the level of anxiety that I always lived with. And always felt. And yes, there was that period in my life where I wasn't drinking and was really anxious. I didn't know how to regulate it. I used food and sugar. But then once I had alcohol, I'm like, why am I doing sugar? Like, the alcohol is just the straight, direct, you know, route. So I was always kind of, you know, doing something, but I had then learned, and that was, you know, I was doing like somatic experience in yoga. I had been studying nutrition even while I was drinking. So when I knew I was going to stop drinking, I put those into place, and they made a huge difference. So first, just not drinking makes a big difference. Second was I really addressed the GABA component. So I took some herbs really regularly. I took lemon balm and passion flower and holy basil, which are, you know, known to really help boost GABA. They're not, you can get them at Whole Foods or any health food store. So it's not a drug effect. It's not a chemical anti-anxiety effect, but it's literally just helping the body bring its own GABA stores up. And in the meantime, giving you that feeling of adequate GABA. So, so I took, you know, some herbs. I took things like L-theanine, which is found in green tea, but when you take it out in a capsule, has a really calming anti-anxiety effect. A supplement that I'm a huge fan of, and I used a lot in those early days, was inositol. And I recommend that to clients a lot. We think of it kind of as like a cousin to B vitamins. Sometimes it's called vitamin B8, but it's not really a B vitamin. You know, it's found in things like cantaloupe and whole grains and things. But often when we're deficient in inositol, the symptoms are just that ruminating, worrying, obsessive, anxious mind. And when you take inositol, it just kind of plugs that leak. And a lot of clients will say to me, they'll say, I don't know, like maybe it's a placebo, but I feel better. And I'm like, no, it's not a placebo. Like it just kind of stops that ruminating mind and gives the brain that anti-anxiety GABA boost. So those are some of the supplements I like.
Yeah, I love the sounds of those. So for people that aren't working with you, should they go to their health food store, or who should they speak to about getting on some of these supplements? Because I know we're not prescribing anything here, but these are things that might be able to serve people that are listening. So inositol, first of all, can you spell that? Do you know the spelling of it?
Let me spell it off the top of my head. So it's INOSITOL. And
I'm so glad you spelled it, because in my brain it was like AN something. So I'm really glad you did that. So, okay, now tell us where we should find it and who we should talk to before we start supplementing.
So any health food store, you know, like a Whole Foods type quality store. I know on the East Coast, Earth Fare is a common one. Here in Colorado, we have Natural Grocers and Sprouts, like just kind of whatever, you know, is that high quality type supplement store in your area is fine. Working with a functional nutritionist Again, this is the work I do, working with a functional doctor, a naturopath, a medical doctor, an acupuncturist. That's what they're trained in. So functional, meaning taking a real functional approach. If GABA's low, what's a nutrient that can go in and serve the function of boosting GABA, which is a different training than just kind of traditional pharmaceutical training.
Mm-hmm. So you do so much with helping people to get their food right as well. And I know that was huge for you, especially when you first got sober. Are there any specific foods that you would recommend people either stay away from or definitely bring into their diet when they get sober to nourish their system?
Well, the first thing that I recommend focusing on is protein. Whatever type of protein you like, animal protein, vegetable protein, different people have different preferences, and there's listen to that preference, because that's your biochemistry speaking. We all have different biochemical individuality, and so our preferences, our tastes, our cravings are telling us something. Actually, even craving alcohol, even craving, there's something there of like what's deficient, what's depleted physically, emotionally, and when we kind of dig into that, we can start to figure it out. So I always tell people, what is it that you crave? Like, what do you really like? What do you not like? Because that helps me understand your metabolism and your biochemistry. So with protein, people will say, ugh, I eat a steak and it just sits like a lump in my stomach. That's really good information. Your body biochemically, doesn't digest, heavy animal protein as well. Then there'll be people, I'm one of them, who will say, oh my God, I eat a steak and I feel so much better. It just makes such a difference. That's my biochemistry needs that, animal protein. So it's not good or bad. It's just what's your constitution, which type of protein do you need? And you kind of know what you need by what you like your body already gives you feedback. So pick a protein that's your preference that you like, and then eat protein every time you eat. There's something to eating, when you wake up, 30 to 60 minutes from waking, eating midday, whatever midday is for you, and then the end of the day. We don't have to make it any more difficult than that. We don't have to split hairs over it. I mean, and I'll work with clients a lot on customizing food, but I find a lot of people just don't even eat regularly. And when you first stop drinking, when you're trying to get things more in balance, when you feel like you're playing whack-a-mole and maybe like brain chemistry, things are just overfiring or underfiring, protein breaks down into amino acids, and it's the building blocks for the body. It's the raw material that our body's constantly breaking down and rebuilding. And our neurotransmitters, the raw materials they need to build more neurotransmitters, is amino acids. So eat protein, eat regularly, psychologically and psychically. If your body can count on you eating regularly, it's huge. And I know it sounds simple and kind of like, yeah. Truly, eat breakfast, eat lunch, eat dinner. It makes the biggest difference. And then just eat whatever protein you like. So those would be my two fundamental foundational things from a food perspective.
It's just so brilliant, because I am completely aligned with your philosophies as well. It's exactly what I believe in my own life and in the life of the people I work with too. It helps so much to start your day with breakfast. If we don't do that, we are just, it really messes with everything, with our metabolism. It messes with our neurotransmitters. And I want you to talk about those now. So I want to talk about specifically GABA, dopamine, serotonin, and if you want to, oxytocin.
Oh, yeah, oxytocin. That's a fun one. I don't talk about that as much. But so the neurotransmitters, the brain chemistry, whatever your whack-a-mole is, and wherever you are on the spectrum, and no one's excluded. No one. Everybody has something. Everybody's somewhere on the spectrum. So if we can, again, just get over that, this bucket of people, this bucket of people. So talking to everybody here, wherever you are. And then everybody also has neurotransmitters. GABA and serotonin are the brakes, the chemical brakes on the body. And again, that's what, at the end of the day of I have that glass or two of wine, it's I just love that break feeling, because where I just kind of then didn't have to talk and my mind shut off. And that was because my GABA was so low. And so then I would put alcohol in, and it mimicked that feeling, but it was, you know, the chemical feeling. So GABA and serotonin, when we have adequate amounts, naturally, we just, you know, on our own feel at ease and don't feel as anxious. And then serotonin is kind of the antidepressant. Don't feel as depressed. We can sleep better. Don't crave carbohydrates as much. Whereas dopamine and acetylcholine are the two neurotransmitters that are the gas pedals for the body. And so we want both, right? Like there's times that we want to go and produce and we got to move, and that's the dopamine. And that's, you know, instinctively what has kept us alive. Like we need to like assess our environment and hunt and protect ourselves, and dopamine needs to be up. But then we need to calm down and be able to go to sleep and rest and regenerate. So when those neurotransmitters get depleted because of lack of sleep, because of stress, because of chemicals like drugs or alcohol, artificial sweeteners, trauma, and so trauma isn't necessarily, you know, this is another stigma that I like to break, that, you know, people are like, I don't have any trauma, because they associate like really severe, like I haven't been in a war, like I'm not a war veteran. Trauma is just anything where we are in a situation and the body has not been able to discharge that event, and it stays stuck in the body. And so then we stay stuck on like an on switch or in a freeze response. So if the body is stuck in like kind of a trauma response, that actually messes up neurotransmitters. Like if we're always stuck on, we are going to really deplete GABA and serotonin at a much faster rate than if we're down at, you know, kind of a baseline. The body wants to like have some stress and then come back, have some stress, come back. But if we are always in the have stress mode, it's really depleting. Mm-hmm. So there's things, you know, for all of these neurotransmitters. The oxytocin neurotransmitter is the connection hormone. So the 11-second hug.
I thought it was 20 seconds. So it's only 11. Okay, that seems easier.
Maybe it's 20. I don't know.
I heard it was 20.
Add another 9 seconds. It's totally good.
Because that's a long hug. I mean, I hug Roger. I make sure that we hug for this 20-second length of time. And both of us, I mean, we love it, but it's like, I wouldn't feel comfortable hugging most people for 20 seconds. Like if you set your watch, it's a good length of time, but it is amazing what happens in that length of time. Just even being able to feel that other person breathing, and I don't know, it's a beautiful experiment to do.
It is, and it's very nourishing to our nervous system. So we are social beings. We bond, we need connection. You know, there's all kinds of studies from orphans in Romania who, you know, have really no connection. I mean, they're just in an orphanage in a crib, and what starts to happen with they do brain scans, and it's so horrifying and sad. And, you know, studies with like monkeys who their physical needs are met. Like they're in a cage, they give them food 3 times a day. They, you know, clean the cage and give them water, the physical components. But then the monkeys where they get that physical component, but then they take them out, they talk to them, they hug them, there's that eye contact, they thrive. Whereas the monkeys who they're eating and getting hydrated, but they start pulling their hair out, they start losing weight. That social connection, that mirror neuron of, you know, connecting with others is a really, really nourishing nutrient. And a lot of people will say, you know, they drink as a way to connect with others. But, you know, the problem is all of our senses shut down and we don't connect. And you can see it with anybody who's had a couple drinks. You can see it in their eyes. We're not connecting. We're not getting that neurological connection, which again, that was something that was really concerning me, like something that I really wanted. And I'm like, when I'm drinking at this level, you know, my boyfriend who I'm with at the time is drinking at that level, like we're not connecting the way our nervous systems need to connect and get that oxytocin hit. Mm-hmm. So connection is a huge nutrient.
Yeah, I'm so glad you touched on it. I'm a big fan of boosting oxytocin as much as possible. How other than hugging people and, you know, and having in real life connections, how can we boost oxytocin?
Those are the 2 that I know about off the top of my head.
Okay.
Do you know about others?
I know there are a couple of foods and I just can't think about them right now. I want to say walnuts for the omega-3s that they boost it, but I don't think that that's true, but we'll do a little research and we'll find out. But certainly connecting with others. I
think of oxytocin so much as literally the connection touch hormone. Like when babies are born, there's research that as soon as immediate as they can go on the mother's chest, like that skin to skin, it's so beneficial for their nervous system immediately, like right after birth. So I think of it as touch and connection.
Me too. And it makes me curious about people who didn't have bonding, close relationships with their mothers when they were young. I imagine that those things come up later on in life, and that's just how it is. And it's not about pointing fingers or blaming anybody. It's just that this is how our brains work. And down the road, we might have to deal with some of those childhood traumas that come up. Like you said, it doesn't have to be this huge trauma of an accident or something major happening. It can be these mild seeming traumas that we are carrying with us. And I imagine that your work, the somatic work that you do, really helps to release a lot of these old traumas that we might not even know are there.
Yeah, I'm so fascinated and interested in the somatic piece, and I'll be including a lot of that in my membership. So, people who are part of that community will get those practical pieces. So this was the thing, there were years where I'm, working as a functional nutritionist. Like I got this physiology of dopamine and serotonin and blood sugar and I was teaching it, but I was also drinking. So having the information, intellectually understanding something isn't necessarily what breaks the emotional patterns around something. And what really became, a key part for me personally and professionally was when I learned the somatic piece. So that was, I need to get my years right, but I think it was 2012, 2013, and I quit drinking in 2014. So the more that came on board, and then I found Bessel van der Kolk's work. Probably a lot of people listening are familiar with The Body Keeps the Score, Bessel's work, and the yoga that I was initially introduced to and the teachers I've trained with, they're very influenced by Peter Levine. So he's kind of the grandfather of somatic experiencing. He's got a couple really great books. His books were part of our study in the somatic yoga. So it became a very influential, crucial piece. First, for me personally, to experience it, a way to start to regulate my own anxiety in my body. And it's not necessarily a cognitive conversation. It's a real, and this is where the neuroscience is that when the body is stuck on that flee response, wanting to flee, which was me, that's that anxiety. I feel anxious, I just want to get out, And so when my physiology is stuck there, how to discharge that and how to release it. Talking about it doesn't do it because it's stuck in the amygdala. It's stuck in the limbic brain. When we talk, we're in the prefrontal cortex, and that bridge is broken between those parts of the brain. So what we want to do is calm the amygdala, calm the limbic brain. And the way we do that, so those parts of the brain do not understand language. That's the animal brain. But what that part of the brain understands is sensation. So we communicate with the amygdala through touch, is one, through the senses, through sound, so music. And people, again, I'm not, everybody can hear a song from high school. It's like, boom, they're back in that moment. That's the limbic brain. But the body hears it and feels it and then gives the message up the spinal cord to the brain. Now we can either calm down or get amped up. Smell does the same thing. Smell has a real kind of emotional, piece. Visual. So either like a guided imagery of visualizing. Guided imagery is very powerful, which is different than meditation. We're actually imagining and visualizing something, or holding our eyes, still. Like I like to look at a candle flame is something I like to do, because when we're anxious, our eyes tend to dart around the environment. We don't really know to try to anchor, look for something to kind of tether us, because the mind is in the past or it's projecting into the future. And when we can use our visual sense to anchor and just have a soft gaze on an object, it gives the message to the body. Okay, visually, I feel, because of the visual piece, I feel more calm. The message up to the brain, now the brain can be calm. So it's using those senses, resourcing the body through touch, sound, smell, taste, and sight. And, anything you read from Bessel van der Kolk, from Peter Levine, these guys who are really the front runners with somatic resource or somatic research, is it's bottom up, not top down. So we have to work with the body, help the body feel calm, either with a nutrient or, you know, ground in the body, a somatic practice. And then that message goes up the spinal cord. We're okay. There's not a bear coming through the door. And then the amygdala can come down.
That's so interesting. So I'm kind of following along. So I imagine, so somatic just means body, correct?
Correct.
Correct. So when you're doing somatic body work, somatic work, your feet would be planted on the ground so that you're feeling that the texture and the sensation from your feet on the ground, and then you're kind of working your way through your body, feeling your body, and softly gazing at something while you're doing that. And then is that kind of how the process works? Like, I'm trying to imagine if someone isn't specifically working with you, how can they practice some of this somatic work in their own home just to try to quell their anxiety a little bit?
Yeah. So what I was just talking about kind of coming back to your senses, using something, you know, using music, using aromatherapy, that's coming back to the senses. But the somatic, there's three kind of primary resources that we call it. So grounding, orienting, and centering. And they're very practical. They're not esoteric theory. So people will talk about being grounded. That sounds good, but how do you do that? Like, that's more theory. How you do it is you bring your attention to what part of your body is on the ground at any given time. So at any time, either our feet when we're standing are touching the ground, our butt is in the chair, so that grounding from the chair, or like lying down, you know, on our back or our belly. So whatever, or you can just put your hands, you know, touch your hands to the ground. So whatever part of your body, your feet, your butt, your back, your hands, bring your attention to the sensation of that part of your body touching the ground. So like right now, the bottom of your feet, just notice if there's any tingling in one part of the foot versus the other as it touches the ground. Notice if there's a temperature shift. One part of the foot might be more warm or cold versus to the other. And then notice like if there's any tingling or clenching as your foot is on the ground. That is how to practically ground your body, bringing your attention to the ground. Because when we're anxious, we're all up in our head. So we want to bring that energy down to the ground. So that's grounding. Orienting is using the visual sense, looking around. So what do you literally see in your space and place right now? Like what objects, what colors? Do you see some shadows? And you can kind of just silently, mentally name that to yourself. And that helps your nervous system come into the now. So we talk about being present, being in the now. That's also can be kind of a little esoteric, but how we do it with our senses is what do we literally see? And then that helps our mind not be behind us or in front of us. And then centering, some people it's their belly, some people it's their heart. And sometimes it, you know, helps to put a hand on either or both. And so again, noticing the ground beneath you, what that sensation is as your body touches the ground. The visual sense of literally the space you're in right now, and then bringing your energy back to your heart center. Putting your hand on your heart, that's that oxytocin, or your hand on your belly. And then notice what your breath does here. How do you feel?
I like that. I was doing that while you were walking me through it. And what I really also was mindful of is that you mentioned oxytocin with placing your own hand on your heart, and how beautiful that we can still activate oxytocin even if we aren't hugging other people and necessarily connecting with other people. We can also do that with ourselves. That's really powerful.
Yeah, so that's some of those somatic acupressure points that I teach and share with clients. We'll share in my membership. This is one, but there's many. So touch, it, like you said, it doesn't have to be, you know, hugging another person. It can, I had a client one time and, you know, taught her the technique, and she's like, this is like the most profound thing. I just put my hand over my heart. She's like, I've been telling my friends about it. I've been telling my daughter, but she's like, it makes a difference. And it seems so weird that it would, like, it's so simple, but just putting your hand over your own heart can send the message to the nervous system that we're okay right now. It invokes a little bit of calm. Nothing outside of us has changed, but it's that somatic body practice to help calm the nervous system. And there's many, many things like that to do.
What I like so much about what I'm hearing about your work is that you really do keep it simple. I mean, yes, we can talk about all these supplements and hormones, and it can kind of feel like, oh my goodness, are we going to be able to understand all this stuff? But what I really get from you is that it doesn't have to be overcomplicated. We can do easy, simple steps every single day to get us closer to where we want to be, and away from such a craving brain towards a brain that is calmer and more relaxed, and where we're feeling calmer and more relaxed and at peace in our lives, because it's really what we're trying to achieve, right? Mental freedom is what we all want. And we don't want to have that anxiety and that anxiousness and that voice constantly going inside of our brains. You need this, you want this, you got to have this, and all of that. So the Craving Brain workshop and membership site, all of what you're doing around the Craving Brain, I think is brilliant. I love that earlier you said something about that you really wanted there to be a voice in the world that was talking about this gray area drinking, and you just weren't finding that voice. And I remember Glennon talking about, here's how you find purpose in your life. You find a need for something, and you step up to that cause, and you fill that need because it's something that is needed in the world. And that's exactly what you've done with your work, Jolene. I am so honored to know you. I think that what you're doing is incredible. You are changing lives every day. Keep doing your incredible work because you're awesome.
Thank you, Sarah. I love connecting with you. It's been so good to meet you on this journey. And I feel the same with everything you're doing. And thank you for the invitation to come on and share today.
Access to all of the free videos and interviews, visit sobrietystartshere.com.